Well, it sure didn't take long for the cracks to begin to appear in the Carney government. It didn't even take a week. And, he's running around doing a lot of pomp and ceremony, but he's actually doing none of the work for Mr. I'm out front. That's my role. And I believe that he thinks that it's just a boardroom. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Well, it didn't take long, less than 24 hours, and we can see that Mark Carney is already losing whatever tenuous grip he had on the country. He can't get the King of England to play nice. The Bloc Québécois has got a court case coming up against him. One of his ministers has spoke out that he's very disappointed in the way that Mark Carney treated him. Pierre Poilievre goes on the grounds of the House of Commons and tactfully and artfully destroys the behavior of Mark Carney. So let's jump right into it. We'll start with the Bloc because there is more than one ballot that has been found, and because there's 6, who knows how many more are out there? And I bet you there's 100 out there. Some people just haven't gotten them in the mail yet. Maybe there's postal carriers who are not working because they're very close to a strike. There's so many ifs and what ifs. Maybe they're still sitting in the return bin. I mean, oftentimes that can take up to 2 months to get your return mail back, right? Let's remember that that's what happened. The computer was scanning the mail as it was coming in, didn't recognize the postal code, put a little bar in their conveyor belt, and the letter went in a different direction, went into a giant bin that will be manually looked at by an individual. So who knows how, and then that individual will take that mail and put it back in. How many people didn't put a return address on their envelope? How many people are still waiting for the postman to get it back into his or her route? Maybe it's still sitting in a sorting station somewhere. There's a lot of chaos going on with the postal union right now because Liberal government had kicked it down the road, and now that time is up, right? They're negotiating their contract right now. So the ripples of this, and Mr. I'm an ex-CEO crisis advisor is nowhere to be seen. He's going on English television complaining about how King Charles shouldn't have gone and made a second overture to Donald Trump. I picked this up from the CBC. I wanted to talk about this before we go ahead and listen to what Francois Blanchet has to say. And I'll be honest, the press were asking him some pretty stupid questions. They were all like, oh, what is this? How does this look? Like, you're not respecting the rules. I mean, he is actually respecting the rules. Bloc Québécois pushed for by-election in Terrebonne after 5 more ballots issued declared in riding. Liberals won the riding by 1. For those of you that might not be aware, the Bloc Québécois had won the riding of Terrebonne, but because it was so close with the Liberal candidate, it was kicked up to a recount because they do that under a certain percentage. I think it's 0.1%. That changed the election by 45 votes, and the Liberal Party won. Then a lady went on the CBC talking about how her vote, which had been for the Bloc and was mailed correctly on time, was returned to her because the government had printed the envelopes wrong, or whoever the government had contracted to do that had printed the envelopes wrong, meaning no fault of her own, which is essentially, and I know the press doesn't want to look at it this way, but this is the truth, denying that woman the right to vote. It's not her fault, right? So when you're not responsible for it, when you follow the rules and then your vote's not counted, that's essentially like me turning you away at the door, saying you're not allowed in for no other reason than because I said so. So that leaves everybody a little bit handcuffed because the judicial ruling had already come down, and Elections Canada doesn't have the legislative authority to trigger a by-election. Now Mark Carney has to trigger the by-election, and the Bloc Québécois wants to make sure that they trigger the by-election, so they're taking it to court, which I don't blame them. That's the smart move to make. That's the rule to do. That's the idea. What I love about the press is they're talking to the Bloc Québécois like the House of Commons is not 95% populated by members of parliament who are all university-educated lawyers. It's an amazing display of tone deaf.
How concerned are you about misinformation circulating about this riding?
I do not give a damn about misinformation. The situation is quite clear. The judge has established that the Bloc Québécois would have lost the riding by 1 vote. The vote appeared in the hands of a citizen in a very clear fashion, and in that situation, the law requires the election to be done all over again in the riding of Terrebonne. This is what we expect. But since, I don't know what's the name in English of Election Canada, but since they cannot by themselves ask for the election to be repeated, we have to bring this situation in front of a judge in a court in order to do the election all over again.
Do you think that sets a precedent that you won't accept official election results from Elections Canada and you're not willing to listen to the vote of the people when your party doesn't win?
I'm not getting into that. I'm sorry to rain on the spectacular parade, but this is not my mindset. There's a law. It appears clear. We have a case. We go forward because we want this election to be held properly, and that's it.
Tax dollars hard at work, ladies and gentlemen. Listening to that press ask the stupidest question you could ever come up with in an effort to just try and stir up some kind of drama. She clearly doesn't understand the legal concepts, and she should not be permitted to ask a question that makes her look so completely out of touch with the reality or the logistical aspects, or even the idea that somebody had their vote denied. Before we get to Pierre Poilievre's comments, we'll talk about the Toronto MP and how he feels disrespected after being dropped from cabinet. The Beaches East York MP, Nate Erskine-Smith, says he wished the new cabinet well from outside looking in. Former Housing Minister Nate Erskine-Smith says it's impossible not to feel disrespected after being dropped from cabinet. In a series of social media posts on Tuesday, the Member of Parliament of the Beaches East York said he ran in the recent election for the opportunity to make an even bigger difference around the cabinet table and to help fix the housing crisis. So then he went on to be polite and all the rest of it so that he can still keep his position. The simple fact is that he's a very junior member and that he was one of the people that stayed behind Justin Trudeau, right? So I know he has a YouTube channel where he likes to interview a lot of Liberal Party members. He actually interviewed Mark Carney on there before he officially announced his desire to be nominated as the leader of the Liberal Party. However, he's also been seen drunk in public trying to mock Melissa Lantsman. So it's not a great look as a politician. Plus, he's got a very abrasive attitude towards anybody that doesn't agree with him. I can't speak to why Mark Carney didn't put him in the cabinet. I can say that if he were in my cabinet, I wouldn't put him anywhere near decision-making processes. I find that he's really immature. Like he acts like some kid at high school. Now, I know most of the Liberal Party seems to be a trend on the far left or even on the left. They act like everything is some sort of gossip fest. But this guy here, who must have believed that he was very close to the top or very close to the rings of power and then gets cut out absolutely 100%. I mean, he must have really been upset about that extra paycheck. I'm assuming that he won his seat again. I mean, it's the beaches in Toronto. Obviously, there's a lot of people down there who vote Liberal. What is interesting to me, though, is that Mark Carney said during his interview with him that he wants to make the beaches even higher density. And I promise you, the people down there don't want that. They're not looking to have their property value touched in any way, shape, or form. So it's going to be an entertaining little exchange between the city of Toronto and Mark Carney, who's going to be in a bad way. Because where else is he going to try to put all this density, if not Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary? Let the games begin. Mark Carney did an interview on Sky News UK to talk about the King coming here and how the King had given a private correspondence to Prime Minister Starmer to give directly to Donald Trump, and how Starmer elected to do that, not secretly, not in private, not through diplomatic channels, but he did it right to him in front of the entire North American press corps, or at least the press corps that was standing in the White House at the time. I mean, the degree of slap in the face that brought to Mark Carney and his hope and fantasy that somehow Europe will finally get behind him and his ideas. I mean, the man has been, according to all the information that I can gather, his reputation is very tarnished because of the state of the British economy. And nobody really wants to deal with him, though they don't want to alienate Canada. And I just think that now that they understand the way the wind is blowing, I believe that now that they understand how much money is going into the United States of America, that they just don't really care what Carney has to say. They see him as almost as a rube or somebody who can be easily, a doormat or something. Which, let's be straightforward, he's way out of his element. He is swimming with sharks and he's still wearing little water wings. Like, he has no idea what he's doing. And I get that a lot of people voted for him. And I'm sure any of them that are listening to my channel currently are having serious buyer's remorse with Mark Carney and the entire Liberal Party, who are no different than they were 6 months ago, except for the fact that Mark Carney is completely trounced by Donald Trump and the UK, and by extension, most of Europe. Carney says Canadians weren't impressed by the UK's offer to a second state visit to Trump. PM says it's no coincidence that the king will read the throne speech while the U.S. challenges Canadian sovereignty. The U.S. is not challenging Canadian sovereignty. They never, ever were. Quite the opposite. Secondly, it's kind of weird that you would say King Charles of Great Britain and then try to say that Canada is a sovereign. We are what's technically known as a sub-sovereign. I mean, we have the right to adjust our own constitution. In 1980, we gained that right. But technically, we are still part of the crown, obviously, or else why would you have invited the king to open parliament? Why would we have the governor general if not? Anyway, I won't bore you with that kind of level of politics. I will say again that if you voted for the Liberal Party because you were voting against Donald Trump or because you felt that he was being able somehow to implement this 51st state, you were duped. And you should be complaining to whomever you elected in your region that you were duped, and putting a lot of pressure on them so that we can get a new election before too long. Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canadians weren't impressed when the UK decided to offer US President Donald Trump an unprecedented second state visit while he was threatening Canada's sovereignty. To be frank, they weren't impressed by the gesture, quite simply given the circumstance. Carney told British news channel Sky News in an interview posted online Wednesday. It was a time when we were being quite clear. Some of us were being quite clear about the issues around sovereignty. Of course, nobody cares what Mark Carney was thinking. Only individuals who only watch one form of news were foolish enough to fall for it. There is a reason that the second that he became leader of the party, he didn't go and talk to Trump. He went and talked to Europe because he really felt like they were going to back his play. Of course, they're not going to back his play. They signed a trade deal with Donald Trump. Ukraine is knuckled under, is giving Donald Trump everything that he wants, and the rest of Europe will follow suit. The rest of the world will follow suit. There's trillions of dollars with the deal that Trump just signed with Qatar. I think he broke 10 trillion. I mean, even if half of that makes it into the country within the next 12 months, are you kidding me? It's probably more than Canada's gross domestic product currently under the Liberal government. And the Liberal government wants our economy to get ever so smaller because they're not going to allow us to open up any industry that they want. They want it to be very specifically controlled by the central government. It's going to be it's going to get real rough in this country real soon. However, I can say with certainty that I don't think anybody was caring what King Charles was doing while they're worried about the price of fuel, energy, rent, food prices. There's a lot of things. We would rather, I believe, have a budget than we would be worrying about King Charles. No disrespect to King Charles. But I think if Canadians were ranking what mattered to them, King Charles opening Parliament is probably nowhere near having the federal government draft a budget. Mr. I'm a CEO, crisis analysis, was in charge of 2 banks, can't put together a budget? That's remarkable.
That's the kind of intricate, hard work that we have to do as parliamentarians to protect our economy, and that takes a plan. A plan. To reverse the Liberal housing crisis, a plan to reverse the Liberal inflation crisis, a plan to reverse the Liberal jobs and economic growth crisis, a plan to stand up against American tariffs. And that plan always comes in the form of a budget. Now, Mr. Carney said during the election campaign that he had a plan. And he took great delight in saying that a slogan is not a plan. Well, a budget is a plan. And if he does indeed have a plan, if he does know what he's doing, then he would introduce a budget.
Pierre Poilievre, with a smile, shreds Mark Carney for not having a budget to offer up. And of course, we know that Mark Carney's trying to subvert or avoid being called to the carpet by the House of Commons for a confidence vote on his budget. And he hopes to maintain power throughout the summer, and maybe that the country or the economy will improve. Or maybe he's just hoping that he can pillage the country while he has the opportunity. I'm not 100% sure what's happening, but I do understand when a man is out of his element, and I do understand when a man is past his skill set, his ability. I mean, the idea that you're going to manipulate the system and exploit the loopholes so that you don't have to give Canadians the promises that you made, so that you don't have to tell Canadians about your conflicts of interest, and so that you don't have to tell Canadians about the economy and how much money you're going to spend on what, for who, when, and where, what projects you're hoping to bring forward. I mean, at this rate, Justin Trudeau was more active than Mark Carney with his fancy, I put a pen and I signed it, instead of using a Sharpie the second time that he signed it. He is obsessed with what Donald Trump does down there. They all are. Which just bothers me, because they think that it's theater. It's not important. It's not people's real lives, right? That's how disconnected they are from the struggle of real life. They think it's all about what they see on television and not how you live and when you walk through your door of your house or your apartment, or how you get up in the morning and you struggle to have to pick between eating lunch and getting on the bus, or all of the issues that are confronted by the common person he thinks is going to be solved with a $33 a month reduction in your taxes. It's ridiculous. It's insulting, actually, when you consider that $33 it's not very much money. I mean, it's certainly not what it used to be. Of course, Mark Carney is nowhere on the subject. He's just trying to give his people the ability to say a whole bunch of stuff to distract and divide and to throw everybody scent off by saying Trump, 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 who hasn't mentioned Canada in a long time and who's not paying attention to anything that the country does, except for to probably see who's available to be purchased. Because right now the economy is tanking so badly that there are, I'm sure, big sections of the country who would gladly join into the United States of America if it meant that they would have a decent job and a decent dollar, a decent strength in their purchase power. I get that it's way more complicated than that. I get more than most the complications that would be presented by that. But that's not altering the position that we're in. That's not changing the feeling on the ground, which is what matters when you're in terrible situations like this. This isn't new. I know that people forgot about it while they were trying to run their election, but now we have Mark Carney cutting checks when nobody's looking, putting theater when he thinks that it's going to change everybody's life, or he wants you to believe it. I mean, a 1%. What's nothing? $2,000 for a family of four, or whatever it was that they're trying to say now. It's the same old tactic that they always play. They throw you a bone and hope, it's essentially let them eat cake is really what it boils down to. Pierre Poilievre sees that. He sees that the population is going to be it's going to be hit with a cold bucket of water once they realize the true breadth and depth of the incompetence of the Liberal Party, and how you feel that they're going to overcome the loss of all of the industry that is now flowing into the United States while trying to maintain their green agenda of excess taxes, carbon tax, industrial carbon tax, where they want to have 2, 3, 4-year approvals for even just opening up a new a new store in your town, never mind opening up the mines, never mind trying to get this country to be tied together from all of its regions, its vast regions. The idea that they were going to do this with the stroke of a pen exposes their lack of comprehension of just about what trouble they're up against. And it should, for you and I, make us realize that they're not, if they don't understand the problem that they're coming up against, that means that they can't solve the problem. If that means that they're not capable and qualified to solve the problem, and they only ran for the big paycheck, they only ran for the glory instead of actually being the guy that wants, or the person that wants to solve these problems that their own party put on. I mean, you would think one of them would have the decency to say to themselves, you know what, I'd like to fix my own broken mess, but it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look like that. You can let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.